Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Saints and Stages. I am Shannon, joined by the other two illustrious hosts today. That's you guys.
Hello,
Hello, I'm Liam.
I'm Sean.
Yeah, Liam's a little under the weather today. He won't be turning his camera on for those that may be watching the video on YouTube. But today, I was the main reader, the primary reader for the saint we'll be discussing today, and that is Saint Brigid of Ireland. I believe her name is pronounced Brigid, usually, but I'm just going to call her Brigid. That's what I'm most acquainted with, and she is generally called Patroness of Ireland. If you can't tell, we all have some pretty Gaelic names, but we're all American. And Sean is even more of a deceiver because he's actually just like Franco-American largely. But either way, I read a couple books for this. This is St. Brigid, Patroness of Ireland. It's kind of a classic, Reverend J.A. Knowles. Very large print. It's just reprinted. This one was pretty good for a general history. To be honest, there's no crazy variance in any of the histories I read. There's always slight differences, but they're all generally the same, right? They're all talking about the same person, and they all generally get most of the same characteristics and events down. The other one I read, which is pretty short, The Life of St. Brigid of Kildare. This is actually by Cogitosis. This is like the first history we have of her. But it also has other selected writings, including a more modern essay in the appendix here about, is Saint Brigid actually a pagan goddess? You can get our thoughts later because we will be giving them. But either way, I do have slides prepared. I think the plan is to probably try to do that from here on out. For those that are listening, it shouldn't be detrimental if you can't see the slides. But if you are watching on YouTube, hopefully the slides are a little bit helpful. I've been adding imagery to the other episodes anyway. And I don't know, I like to see images of things and places that we're talking about, briefly at least. Was there anything you guys wanted to say as far as a general introduction before I start sharing the slides?
Yeah, I think you pretty much covered it, Shannon. You said, I mean, a lot of the sources they're pretty consistent, telling the same general story, and I think they've pulled from a lot of the same earlier sources, which helps. Even though some of those sources have some inconsistencies, we have to try to kind of find the middle ground between them sometimes, and that seems to be the same general pattern that a lot of modern scholarship has followed, trying to find that middle ground between all these varying medieval sources.
Yeah. Middle ground, man. Thanos was right about one thing, balance is awesome. It's beautiful. and I'm a RuneScape player, Guthix, the god of balance. That stuff's cool. The virtue of the mean. Thank you, Aristotle. Thank you, all my favorite thinkers throughout the world. It's finding the balance. But definitely the same when it comes to, I think, history in many ways, right? Just not only hagiography, but just the historical person, right? But I'll go ahead and start sharing my slides.
I was just going to say real quick that
yeah.
For some reason, every single one we've covered so far has been from the British Isles and early medieval. And actually pretty early medieval too.
Yeah, that's true. And I don't think we're breaking that trend next month.
Yeah, it's continuing.
But maybe we'll break it after that. Who knows? I hope everybody is interested in all this stuff. There are some non-early British saints that I'm interested in. But I'm sure if we keep doing this for a while, that we'll get to a broad geographic area and cultural area. But should hopefully all be the same. All these people tend to point us towards Christ, right? That's the general idea. So St. Brigid, she is the patroness of Ireland. There actually are a lot of names for St. Brigid. She seems to be very, very highly thought of. Her miracles are plentiful. We're not going to go over a lot of them. We're going to go over a small fraction pretty much because there are a lot of them. But another name for her is A Flame Golden, which is from Olton's hymn. I think it's a particular translation of that hymn because I've seen other translations and they don't call her A Flame Golden necessarily. But I think it sounds awesome. I think it's beautiful. Speaks high of her character. But either way, St. Brigid is often also considered the mother of Ireland. She is the patroness saint. She is one of 3 national saints of Ireland. One, of course, being St. Patrick. Um, he's the most famous, I think, probably by far. I mean, if you count general populace, I mean, not that most Americans, the average American intelligence is not what you should be judging what's important by at all. But everybody knows who St. Patrick is, and at least in America, and I assume a lot of people do in Europe, and a lot of religious people might know who St. Patrick is. St. Brigid, I think, is probably up there too for a lot of people that actually care about saints. And the other one is Columba. I think he's often associated with Scotland as well, because he was kind of the missionary in Scotland with his monastery on Iona, but he was Irish himself, like ethnically speaking. Yeah, and Downpatrick is where they're all buried actually together. That's not how it originally was, but that's in County Down, just pretty much just south of Belfast in Northern Ireland in the UK today, considering political boundaries. And St. Brigid herself was actually translated there in 878 because she was not originally buried there. And Sean knows why she was translated, right, Sean?
Yes, those great Vikings were attacking,
Yeah.
and they needed to save her relics from the ravages of these barbarians.
Yep. Those darn barbarians. That seems to be a theme, actually, is their corpse or their body is translated because of Viking raids threatening them. But that also, again, kind of follows the trend Liam saying we keep following the early medieval saints. But yeah, so St. Brigid is still supposed to be at Downpatrick. There is a tradition that says I believe it was in the 1300s that, or sorry, 13th century, or maybe it was 1300s. I'm not exactly sure. Either way, a few hundred years after she was translated there, they were supposed to have seen her body there with Patrick and Columba. So tradition says that they're still there. Some people might say, contrary to this, in fact, it's impossible to know perfectly without digging up where they're supposed to be, but I don't recommend we do that. I think it's fine regardless. And St. Brigid is there now, but she's not St. Brigid of Downpatrick, right? In many ways, people just associate her largely with Ireland these days, but back then she would have been more heavily known in her certain locality, and then more specifically associated with her locality. To be honest, she's a pretty big name and a pretty important person. Even during her life, it seems that she was pretty well known. Hence, perhaps her level of importance today is just kind of carrying over from her own life. But she's also St. Brigid of Kildare. And different sources say, we do know she is largely associated with Kildare, right? Kildare is Church of the Oak in Irish. And she may have been born in Kildare. It's kind of tough to say. Again, I'm not sure it really matters all that much. Some sources say she was born near Kildare. Some say she was born near Drogheda. Either way, she was born in Leinster. She was a part of a certain people whose name I can't remember and probably couldn't pronounce anyway. But they were like a Leinster tribe. So from the east of Ireland. That's at least consistent. And then she was born in either 451 or 452. And we did mention that the history is pretty consistent. There is a little bit of variation when you get in her early history. But we do know, generally speaking, that her mother was a slave, or more specifically, a concubine, to a relatively prominent man who was a Christian. And this, again, would have been at a time when Ireland, of course, was not completely Christian. I mean, you think of Ireland now, maybe largely atheist, actually. But, for a lot of Irish history, it's been Christian. But that's still happening. People are still getting converted during this time. There's still a lot of paganism going on, right? And when her mother, who was a slave, had conceived Brigid, her father gave her mother away to a druid. Some sources say that Brigid's father was a pious Christian man, but his actions seem rather contrary to that, at least for Brigid's early life and even before she was born, it would seem out of character for a pious Christian to willingly give away, well, for willingly have a concubine, essentially, but then also, when she conceives, give her away to just a pagan who in many ways would be considered, I guess, kind of the enemy, or at least your competition as far as faiths go. But lots of the stories actually, they don't show really well on her father, who was a Christian, but they do actually are pretty kind towards her stepfather who raised her, because he was a druid, he wasn't Christian, but it's said that even 3 angels appeared to him before Brigid was born, and so he like pretty much knew that she was going to be great, even though she was not going to be a pagan like him. And she does eventually actually go back to her father's house when she's like coming of age, but we'll get into that a little bit. So there are some examples of her early charity. I think charity might be the biggest characteristic to describe Brigid, which is perhaps the biggest characteristic to describe Christ. I think perhaps the most important thing for us to learn in this life to be most like Christ is to learn to love. And I think pretty much all the miracles of Brigid demonstrate this, and even some of her earliest ones. So one that is pretty well known, and this, for those that don't know, this is a St. Brigid's cross, usually made of rushes on the side here. I ordered one. I'll be making one today on St. Brigid's Day. But either way, the earliest one, are you guys actually acquainted with any of these?
Not particularly, no.
Okay. They are actually all quite similar. It's mostly she is returned to her father's house because the druid, her stepfather, is pretty much like, you should have your wife or concubine, like woman who you've obviously been close to, and your daughter should be in your house. And so she is returned. I'm not exactly sure what age. It sounds like she was maybe preteens or early teens. There's actually a book I saw looking up this stuff. It's like a kid's book, like Brigid in the Butter or whatever. And I haven't read it, but either way, the butter is like I would say one of her earliest attested examples of charity and miracles. There are some that I will say there's one that, like, when she was born, she couldn't be fed by the pagan hand of her stepfather. So a pure white cow with red ears came and she drank from the udders of the cow. That one seems a little like, Romulus and Remus, but it's a cow instead. And so I don't know about that one. But either way, I think it's just showing her, her purity. In many ways, her absolutely not being very Christian, definitely not a pagan, which we'll get into later. But early examples of her charity is her butter. So her father had a bunch of butter and she gave it away to help feed people. And then, so as to not get punished or for it to necessarily be a problem for them, she just prayed for it to be replenished, and it was. And then similarly, after she had been returned to her father, she gave away a lot of his belongings to like help other people, help clothe other people. So she's helping to feed them, helping to clothe them. This is what the Lord does for you as well. And then like the stuff was replenished again. It's always something similar like that. The sword was, her father had a jeweled sword that she gave away to someone. That was actually the sword it wasn't replenished. I'll say this one at least, because her father was like so annoyed with her that he went to another king in Leinster somewhere and was trying to give her away again. And while he was like trying to do that, she gave away his jeweled sword to a man so he could like, barter with it and like feed his family. And so the other king was like, your daughter is, awesome, pretty much, like obviously a really righteous and like special child. You should keep her in your house. And so he was like, okay, whatever. Like begrudgingly was like, oh, okay, I guess I'll do it. She keeps giving away all my nice things. What the heck? But either way, shows her early charity. She doesn't really have necessarily a desire for earthly wealth or anything like that, but she's always trying to clothe and feed and just help other people survive, right?
Yeah, I think these kind of stories are great. You can see Christ, I think, on both ends of the story. You can
Mhm.
see Christ in Brigid giving, helping, but you can also see Christ in those receiving, those who are suffering, those who are lacking. And I think when you help the least of people, you see Christ in those people. And when you're giving your worldly possessions to help to Christ through His people in some ways.
That's fair. That's a good point. He is the poor wayfaring stranger, is he not? Yeah.
Exactly.
No, it's a good point as well. And we've this is kind of just repeating themes, right? Pretty much all the saints we've talked about thus far is they're very Christ-like. Some stuff like the cow might feel a little over the top, but it's often in their like simple acts of love and charity and helping the least of these, my brethren, right? Is where we can learn the most. So okay, but when she was of age, uh, we I think the sources said she was probably about 20. I want to say about 28 or 29 or so. Like about it was about my and Liam's age, so something like that. She started two monasteries. She was consecrated as a virgin, and so she was a sacred virgin, and she gets compared to Mary quite a lot. In fact, like she's raised to the same level of Mary by some. Like she's given very very high praise. Like I will see it in the end with Olton's hymn. She's pretty much like called the mother of Jesus, and so they think very very highly of her. She does start two monasteries in Kildare, so she's Saint Brigid of Kildare largely. We saw it on the map earlier, just a little bit west and slightly south, I guess, of Dublin. Drogheda, the other place that she was potentially born, was just north of Dublin. All in Leinster, though. But she was consecrated as a virgin. She founded those two monasteries. She is said to have established many other churches, um, specifically in like Connacht, like west of the River Shannon, and like made her way back over. But the two churches or monasteries she's most famous for are the ones in Kildare. Liam, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that we already mentioned that Kildare is the Church of the Oak, but it's the Church of the Oak because she made it out of oak staves that she got from the king, right? Did we talk about this? I don't think.
No, I didn't.
Okay. Yes.
Go ahead.
Anyways,
Is that
I
it?
don't.
Okay.
I don't really have much to say. I remember that one,
Yeah. Which
but I don't remember any details besides that.
oh, you're fair. I don't really remember any details beyond that either. I know that Kill is like church. It's kind of like Kirk almost in Scotland, but there's like Kildare, Kilkenny are the most famous ones in
Yeah.
Ireland as far as like counties. I guess there's Killarney out west as well. But yeah, Kill Church, and then of the Oak. This is some people think trees. I guess I was saying we are going to talk about this at the end, but I keep intermingling it. Some people think trees, and they're like, "Oh, pagan," and it's like, no, that's not what's going on. At least not right here, right? She's making a church,
Yeah.
and she's
I mean,
using, yeah,
trees convert really easily to Christianity. I mean,
Mhm.
like, I can't tell you how many Old English words there are for the cross, right? And almost all of them are just words for tree.
Right, yeah, and I mean, even I don't know about Eastern Orthodox liturgy, but like LDS liturgy, like the Tree of Life, there's a lot of symbolism with that. I would even consider like the menorah the Tree of Life and stuff like that, like ancient temple liturgy. And so there's trees are sacred to Christians as well. It's not just a pagan thing, but it's not obviously in this case. I don't think she was just sitting in a grove of trees like the Druids were necessarily supposed to be, but I think she's actually built a house right to the Lord. And so she built a church. And this is the picture image here is the church that sits there today in Kildare. It's supposed to be on the site of where the original one was. And this is where Brigid should have originally been buried. Of course, she was translated in 878. But did you have
I
something
have
else to add, Liam?
I have some funny etymology for you.
Okay.
Kirk is coming from Norse. Just a heads up.
Okay.
Yeah, it's Old Norse word for church. It's related to church.
Mhm.
Kill is not related to church. Kill is actually coming from Latin.
Oh,
Cella. It'd be cella, I guess, in like ecclesiastical Latin. What's funny is that what this is cognate with in English is it would actually be an H at the beginning in Germanic languages, since it's a
okay.
K in Indo-European languages besides that, and it's related. It's, oh gosh, okay. Kella is like a room, right? It can be a part of a temple, in particular, like an altar or sanctuary
Like
shrine
s
in
like
Latin.
oh, is this the same as like cella, like the cell area?
Yeah, I think that's probably where the word cell comes from, if
Yeah.
I were to
Okay.
be honest. And but what's interesting that the native English word it's related to is heal, Hele, which is a archaic verb, which means to conceal or to hide. It's actually what the word hell is. Hell is the hidden place. So I
Huh.
think that's interesting that their word for church is related to our word for hell.
Hell. Yes. She built a church in hell of the Oaks, and yeah, that's what we're going with. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I didn't know that. I guess the Latin relation would make sense. Um, in the hidden place, I mean, even like early saints, I've heard were described as having like, and this is what the Romans didn't like, is they were having like love feast because there were like these hidden liturgical things where they would also eat like the Last Supper and stuff, like some sort of Eucharistic thing, and because they were hidden, the Romans criticized them heavily and thought they were like do it pretty much giving them bad press, saying like, oh, those silly Christians are having orgies and stuff like that in their weird ceremonies. But either way, Kildare, back to that Ireland. No orgies here, but that's just Romans projecting. We know that. But the either way, there's a couple other figures that are pretty interesting. When if you've noticed from the last one, especially the last one, Saint Mungo, there's just a lot of main characters that he interacted with in his life, and Saint Brigid also interacted with quite a bit. There is some stretch that say Saint Patrick actually lived longer than. There's one record that says he lived longer than most records say, and if that's possible, if that actually did happen, then him and Brigid perhaps did meet, because part of her history actually is having met St. Patrick. But as far as the historical account goes, it seems a little unlikely. He probably, according to most sources, passed away when she was like 10 or 11. And so maybe not as likely, but she did interact with some other relatively well-known Irish saints, even if they're not quite as famous as St. Patrick or herself. But St. Conleth, it was one of them. So she started the monasteries at Kildare, one that she was the head abbess or whatever you call it, and then he was the abbot for the men. And so they were kind of joint monasteries and churches. He was the head abbot and bishop as well. And so she invited him to be the bishop in Kildare because, well, she needed a male, I guess, priesthood holder to do so. There's some sources also arguing, probably like modern feminist stuff, that argue that there's some texts that kind of describe her almost using languages like she herself was a bishop. But even if that language was used, it's probably just to give her praise, because the historical account still doesn't really seem like she was really a bishop. If she was actually a bishop, she wouldn't need to invite Conleth, right, to come be the bishop at Kildare. But he is also a saint, Saint Conleth, and he's associated in those early days of Kildare being established alongside Brigid. And the other one is Saint Darluda. I actually don't know if I said that right, but she's the one that stepped up as the head of the monastery there after Brigid died. And their feast days are actually the same day. She died exactly like 1 year after Brigid died. And the miracle associated with her, I guess you can call it a miracle. It's definitely like Brigid intervened. Darluda had been infatuated with a man, and so Brigid knew she was going to sneak out to go, you know, do some stuff with that man. And Brigid put hot coals in her shoes and was saying like, hopefully, like, and Darluda like burned her feet and didn't go. And Brigid pretty much said that hopefully this fire has caused you pain, but hopefully it's like saved you from the other fire of passion would have caused you much more pain and torment in the long run if you had, broken your vows. And then she healed her feet. Like she washed her feet and like anointed her and healed her pretty much. Much, I guess, reminiscent of Christ again. But and Darluda replaced her as head of the monastery when she passed on February 1st, and then a year later, so did she, Darluda. But Darluda is interesting because her name is Lu. I believe her name translates to something along the lines of daughter of Lu. Like she's a daughter of God, but of pagan God. Liam, did you have anything to add to that name from etymology, language stuff?
I mean, Lou sounds right.
Yeah, I mean, Lu's in there. I know it has something to do with Lu. So, but, and of course, Lu is simply named after the band Lunasa. No, the Celtic festival, August 1st, is Lunasa. The Harvest Festival, largely. And there was a great film that we watched not too long ago called Dancing at Lunasa, the Brian Friel play, as where it's based off of. But Lu is a pretty prominent Irish, but also just, I think, Celtic god. The city of Lyon is named after him as well in France. But that's interesting that we have a very pagan name who's a very Christian figure. But that's some of the more interesting stuff. Obviously, I'm giving you more historical stuff as well, intermingled here. But she did die in about 524 or 525 AD. This is a painting by John Duncan, the Scottish painter. I love this painting. It's so good. This is her Saint Brigid being carried away after she died by two angels, and it's beautiful. The story associated with her death is that Saint Nini, there's actually two Saint Ninnies. One Saint Nini is one of the 12 apostles of Ireland. This is the other one. I think he's less famous, but when he blessed Brigid as she was being buried and such like that, the one hand that touched her, he was like, she was so pure that he never used that hand like ever again. He encased it in iron so he wouldn't have to use it again. So he was Saint Nini of the pure hand, and his hand was pure because it touched Brigid and she was that pure. So I thought that was super interesting.
It's kind of cute. I mean, it sounds difficult to go through life with one hand, but
yeah,
maybe worth it. Really taking that, I'm never washing this hand seriously. Then
Yeah, I mean, I could see someone like Gimli doing that if it was Galadriel, right? And so I guess maybe she was just that awesome and he was that infatuated with her because she was just that pure and holy. Which I guess I can't blame him in that regard. Okay. But then there are a few more miracles. There's actually, I have mentioned this, there are a lot of miracles attested to St. Brigid, a lot of them. I'd invite you to read up more on them. There are a couple that seem a little bit more mythological, maybe a little bit more far-fetched because they seem to be borrowings in some regard from stories of St. Lucy. Like her brothers were upset when she vowed herself to be a virgin because they're like, oh, we're going to lose out on the bride price of getting, our sister married. And a man pretty much told her that, with eyes as beautiful as yours, like there's no way you'll be, single long essentially. And she like plucked out her eye and then like essentially cursed him, and he ended up losing both his eyes and stuff like that. So it's kind of playing on St. Lucy in some regards. I'm not sure about that one. I think again, it's just kind of showing her purity. her dedication to her, her life as a consecrated virgin. Um,
I mean,
the other one,
it fits with the name of the fire name that she has, right? And Lucy means light
mm,
in Latin,
yeah,
or that's where the name comes from, at least. So.
yeah, fair enough. That's true. That's the thing is like some of the stuff, even if the story itself is apocryphal, they're telling the story for a reason, right? Like it is still characteristic of the person themselves, right? So did that actually happen? I don't know. I'm partial to doubting that, but I still think it's trying to tell you something about Saint Brigid, right? Which is probably accurate, even if the story itself is a tale, right? Um, the other one is related to Ditto. I can't remember the full extent of the Ditto story, but it was essentially, all the land. Ditto would get to keep all of the land that like a cowhide could cover. So she just cut the cowhide into different quadrants and had it covered.
She made like strips, yeah, and
Yeah.
like marked off an area. Um,
Hmm.
so because the one guy who owned the land thought she was a ding dong,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. So
she
and
showed
that's
him.
and Saint Brigid's story is certainly I think related to that, but it seems I think it's a bit better actually. Is she asked for some territory to be donated by a local lord so they could build a convent because it was on the edge of like some woods and so some fertile land that they could also so they could farm a bit, but it was also near the woods so they could gather berries and stuff. And the king was like, no. And so she was like, well, how about uh, if however much my cloak can cover, you do it. And he was like, okay, I guess, because that's not going to cover anything, whatever. And so she just had she had different like nuns run different ways with her cloak, and her cloak just kept expanding until it covered a wide swathe of land. And the king was like, wait, enough. Like I'll donate some land so you can build your convent. And then he was pretty much so impressed with Brigid and her piety that he actually ended up converting to Christianity and being a great help with his wealth to helping the poor as well. That one's pretty interesting. I actually think it's better than the Ditto story, but I could see where there might be some influence there.
Note that her name is normally said Dido in English, as far as I'm aware, but I could be wrong on that. I mean,
Okay, then.
it's a Phoenician name, I think, right? So that means it's Semitic, and I have no clue what it actually was in actuality.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm saying the common people's pronunciation, just like I'm saying Brigid. Most people aren't going to come in here and be like, it's Breege. But I guess Liam will be in the comments saying, it's Dido, not
I'll give you
Ditto.
all the hate comments. Well, I mean, it is Dido. I mean, as far as like phonetically speaking, I've just always heard it Dido. I could be wrong, even, but
Honestly, I don't know if I've ever heard anybody talk about her story. I've only ever read it, and it's hard to guess pronunciations
that's
when you don't
okay.
know languages. But
Fair.
anyway,
I mean, phonetically, like I said, it is Ditto. So
okay.
who knows what
Well,
the stress is, but
yeah, I don't. But the some of her other miracles just pretty much include that the wind and rain obey her. In many ways, you could say to not destroy people, but not destroy their crops. That, of course, is very reminiscent of Christ, where even the wind and the rain obey him. But most of her miracles are described as like helper miracles and little quotes that's described as a lot of healing, feeding the hungry, and rescuing the weak from violence. She was kind of a champion of the poor and just like a champion of the common folk in many ways. She does have interactions with lords and kings and stuff like that, but the bulk of her practice was tending to the least of these, my brethren, right? And a lot of it is just helping with food and healing people and helping them escape abuse and violence like that, helping like rescue them, save their lives, and more ways than one, right? And so that's pretty much what St. Bridget's all about. And there's just a lot of that repeated. A lot of the miracles, in many ways, are very similar, but either way, it seems to be a constant. A constant in her life was just uplifting those around her, helping the needy. And then did mention it. There
Well,
is
wait,
some
wait, wait,
controversies.
wait. If she's
Okay.
associated with like weather, is she like? Is there like weather lore that's associated with her feast day?
I don't know.
Like if the weather is a certain way on the first or whatever, does that mean something? Because I know there's a good amount of saints actually that have weather lore associated with them. Like Swithin is one that comes to mind. There's several French ones too.
I am not sure. I wouldn't be surprised. Maybe that's a more localized thing, or maybe it's like maybe that would be more well known in Ireland. Obviously, I'm not. I've never celebrated St. Brigid's Day really beyond what today. Should be celebrating St. Brigid's Day today. Um, but that wouldn't surprise me at all. Actually, that's something to think about. I'm not sure if somebody knows. Of course, feel free to let us know in the comments. You can comment about anything. You can tell us that we're stupid and smelly, even though you don't know we're smelly. But
But we
either
are.
way, yeah, whatever. But the there are two big controversies that will come up. If you look up anything about St. Brigid and you're studying her, you're bound to run into this stuff because it seems to be all over the place now. St. Brigid, in many ways, has become an icon for different people who aren't the religious Christian devoted type. Um, they're often devoted, I guess, to something else, but it's usually their agenda and their present new age religion and what have you. And not to say that those are universally terrible, but I do think there's not much grounding. Having done, I guess, albeit limited research while reading up on St. Brigid, I'm not sure that these are very grounded. But I'll give a little bit of background on the pregnancy miracle. So it's accounted as a miracle in the life of Saint Brigid. This one's mentioned pretty universally. Is that there was a nun under passion. She had some sort of a love affair, and she conceived a child. And Saint Brigid, so that the nun wouldn't be disgraced and she could continue to keep her vows and dedicate her life to the Lord, she ended the pregnancy. And this is often, I think there's even an organization in Ireland for abortion rights named after St. Brigid because of this. So she's seen as committing, like, she's seen as performing one of the earliest abortions. And I read articles about how, like, Brigid did an abortion back in the 500s, which could have gotten you arrested in 20th century Ireland or whatever. Like, are we sure that Ireland's really Christian, like St. Brigid? And so it was kind of inflammatory stuff that I was reading. But either way, Sean and I were talking about this a little bit before we started recording. I can definitely see how that kind of grays it a little bit when anybody, especially it might just be our modern conception, right? If you hear, oh, I ended a pregnancy, I feel like 100% of people are going to think the same thing these days. Oh, you got an abortion. But I mean, I was reading, it seemed mostly just the Catholic perspective, and I think it's relatively compelling. That if you study the life of St. Brigid, all about helping the poor and sustaining life, right? It seems, and how, like, just how pure and pious she was, it seems very, very out of character for her to commit an abortion. She wouldn't kill, especially the most innocent and innocent and weak
I
life.
mean, yeah, that's pretty like blatantly against pretty much any Christian sex dogma or doctrine. Like that doesn't, I don't know. It just doesn't sound like an abortion. Obviously, I mean,
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I don't want to get too political on this channel, but I will say without reservation that I think abortion is a terrible practice. Like, it's absolutely terrible. People use it as birth control. Essentially, people can argue around this as much as they want and get all up in an uproar. Feel free to be up in an uproar in the comments, but that's like
more
that
hits.
abortion. Yeah, abortion is just usually done out of convenience, and there's no way getting around the fact that you are just terminating a life, even if the child's not born yet. I don't care what traditions, the child only counts it unless they were 8 days old or whatever they say. That you're still ending a life purposely, willfully. literally often tearing the child limb to limb, and I think it's horrific and evil, to be honest. But that's not the point necessary, but it is the point to some regard, because I think it's evil, and I don't think I'm nearly as pure as St. Brigid was. And so the idea of St. Brigid doing such a thing is not only just out of character, it's pretty much unimaginable. So I can see what the Catholic defense is getting at, right? And then on to the other thing. Don't want to get too heated. The pagan goddess. This is a super common one. This is definitely more well known than the pregnancy miracle / abortion thing. Pregnancy one might be pretty well known in Ireland. I wouldn't be surprised if that's pretty well known just because of their political climate. But the abortion's been on the docket, like on the voting ballot for some years now, like in our lifetime, right, in Ireland. And but the pagan goddess idea, this one is pretty much just become universally accepted as true because people have said it's true so many times, you know. And I guess that's all that matters, right? It's the internet told me it was true, so it is. And 3 random Americans aren't the internet enough, I guess, to say otherwise. But I will also say this one, I'm guilty of this as well. Like, I was just kind of assumed that she was a Christianized pagan goddess because that's what I had been told a million times. But now it seems there's pretty much no evidence for it. And not only is it a contested idea but there seems to be a good argument that it's just false.
Yeah, when you just look at things on the surface level, it's easy to make these connections and assumptions. Oh, there's oaks. Oaks were pagan, so there must be a connection.
Right.
When they're really, I mean, when you dig even just a little bit beneath the surface, those kind of arguments start to unravel.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think especially like with the oaks, I mean, oaks definitely have a very kind of pagan nuance to them. Like it makes me think of like Donner's oak, which was the kind of the sacred tree for the Germanic pagans that Saint Boniface actually chopped down and then built a church out of. So yeah, it's easy.
Based.
When someone yeah.
We will talk about Boniface in a future episode, I'm sure.
Yeah, so I mean, it's easy to want that oak connection to be there for Brigid too with the pagans, if that's the agenda you're trying to push. Well,
yeah,
oaks are pagan.
Right, apparently. The thunderstruck tree. Yeah, I can't say I've looked into it much, but I will say that oftentimes there's like kind of basic truisms that don't really have much backing them up, right? I mean, I recently did a video on my other channel about how it's a truism, right? And that King Alfred got the name the Great during the Renaissance, right? During modernity, right? And it's not the title he had in the medieval period, which is actually false. He's actually called the Great several times in the medieval period. A lot of people assume, for example, also that like the day for Christmas comes from Sol Invictus, right? But Sol Invictus is a rather late Roman holiday. In the first source that mentions Christmas being December 25th is also the first source Sol Invictus is mentioned as being December 25th. In fact, it easily could just be the other way around. Sol Invictus could have been chosen as that date because the Christians celebrated Christmas on that day.
Right. And that's fair. Even like another really common one is like people say, "Oh, Easter, the pagan holiday, is from Astra or whatever, a pagan goddess," and it's like, wait, like wait, no, you're confusing like the language here because first off, like Easter's is only called that in English, isn't it? Like Pascal or something like that in most other languages. Yeah, and so that's such a you haven't looked very far beyond your own stupid language.
Actually, you haven't looked at all behind.
Yeah.
We'll talk about Easter too at some point, I'm sure. But
yeah, we'll need to.
Yeah, but looking at all these various pagan claims, I mean, it just takes 2 seconds of looking to realize I mean, most of these sources that make these claims are hundreds of years after Saint Brigid lived. I mean, some of them are Victorian inventions.
Mm-hmm.
Um, no archaeological evidence whatsoever for there having been a sacred grove used by the Druids or the pagans or any of these other stories. I mean, the evidence just isn't there.
Yeah, that's
Right, yeah, so it's just kind of bold to assume. I mean, we can't say for sure that she wasn't a pagan goddess, but
right. But
it, I don't know. So.
that's the thing. Is like, I guess so. We can't say for certain that she wasn't a pagan goddess beforehand, but we can even less certain say that she was a pagan goddess beforehand, because most of the historical evidence points towards her actually being just a saintly Christian.
Right.
Pretty much the evidence we have would suggest that, and that's
Yeah,
the
the earlier
opposite of
evidence,
what
as far as I'm aware.
the popular idea is anymore. Thing is, what is truth? Pilots, no, but it's it's most people don't actually care about truth, and that's the thing is, I mean, I argue on apologetic videos on YouTube because I like wasting my time, I guess sometimes, but the people don't really care about the truth. I've found most of the time they care about their agenda, and they might not like the word agenda because that's a dirty word, I guess, but it's true. Most people just want to gratify their own ego, um, and they want to feel like, yeah, actually, I am the best and I'm right, and history proves me right, or whatever. And it's like, you don't know anything about history. I'm certainly not the best either. I mean, I'm sure I'm guilty of this to some extent, at least, right? I think we all are. But you will find lots of history doesn't support your argument and your stupid opinion, and often history is inconclusive anyway. Uh, but I think the best picture we have from the history for Brigid is in fact that she is a Christian saint. Can we say with 100% certainty? No, I don't know what we can say with 100% certainty about, a lot of things we can't really, but especially this period in time. But she does not seem to be a pagan goddess. There's not really strong enough evidence for me to be over in that camp. And it should not be evidence that a lot of people have said that she is. Just because people say it doesn't mean it is so. Um, and so, on a more positive note, we'll get away from the controversial nonsense that is the world and bring it back down to Brigid, right? This Christ-like woman. Another great name for her is she is the Mary of the Gale, because she was raised so highly that she is equated with Mary, the mother of Jesus, right? And so, actually, I've been talking a lot. Does someone else want to read this?
Yeah, I'll read it.
Okay, thank you, Sean.
Bridget, excellent woman, a flame, golden, delightful. May she, the sun dazzling splendid, bear us to the eternal kingdom. May Bridget save us beyond throngs of demons. May she overthrow before us the battles of every disease, the branch of blossoms, the mother of Jesus, the true virgin, dear, the vast dignity. May I be safe always with my saint of the Leganins, one of the pillars of the kingdom, with Patrick the preeminent, the vesture Aureliga, the queen of queens. Let our bodies after old age be in sackcloth. With her grace may Bridget reign on us, save us.
Thank you. Amen. Um, yeah. And I think this sums it up. There's actually another pretty famous hymn on Brigid that I can recommend you read. It's also in this is where I got the Olton's hymn from. This is just a nice and short one. And so I put it in here. I thought it'd be a nice place to end with Brigid. She definitely seems to be amazing. And it's, again, kind of like St. Mungo, not necessarily amazing in these fantastic and like worldly ways, but in a spiritual and Christ-like way. And I think that's the most important in the long run.
Yeah, and this is a 7th century hymn, isn't it? It's pretty old. But yeah, it's nice. It's always nice to read about the different saints and to see how they can well strengthen those around them and strengthen the faith of those reading about them many years later. So, and I have a scripture real quick that reminds me of faith. I don't know. Bridget reminded me of it. Oh wait, I just closed it out. I opened
Go back.
it. There it is. My mouse is broken, so it double clicks and then closed it. Anyways, I found it again. It's Hebrews 11 verse 6. But without faith, it is impossible to please Him. For he that cometh to God must believe that He is, and that He is a rewarder of them that diligently seek Him. And Bridget definitely someone who diligently sought Him and sought to help people also find Him.
Agree with that. Thank you, Liam. Sean, do you have any last words?
Yeah, I think. I mean, Saint Brigid. I think she's a saint, like a lot of the other ones we have, very much in spreading the faith in the early days of Christianity. And like Saint Mungo, I mean, she traveled around. She didn't just stay in one place. She traveled around, preached, spread the faith wherever she walked. And I think that's something that we can take with us too. I mean, don't just sit here. Don't just be Christians in our church, but be Christians and spread the faith every step we take, no matter where it leads us.
Fair enough. Those are true words. Good words. Thank you. Bridget did it. I know we can do it too. There might not be hymns sung for us like this at the end of our lives, but we can at least still be more like Bridget, and I think in the many ways that would help us be more like Christ, right? Which is always a good thing. We have been Saints and Sages. Appreciate you guys watching and listening, especially if you've listened to the end here. Please feel free to like, subscribe, I guess, all that jazz, but also leave a comment. Feel free to tell us your favorite thing about Brigid, your least favorite thing about Liam, and maybe a saint you want us to talk about in the future, or a sage, because we're going to have to do something like that along the lines too. The one I really want to do, guys, I'll say this on the air, is I kind of want to, mostly because I just want an excuse to study him, is Heraclitus from the pre-Socratics. I'm not sure how much of a sage he is, really, but still.
Okay, well, God bless.
Thanks, guys. See you soon.
Have a good night, everyone.
Yeah, next month should be Liam primary reader, so you don't want to miss it. But see you guys then.